Might want to give it just a couple more minutes before we start, just to make sure everybody logs in. Want to get started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Silver. I'm the director of the Berkeley Neuroscience PhD program. And we're delighted to have you here today as part of the Graduate Diversity Admissions Fair at UC Berkeley, and excited to be able to talk with you about our program. Of course, it's a personal decision whether you have your video off or on, but if you're comfortable having your video on, we would love to see you. And we'll start with introductions of those of us who are representing the Berkeley Neuroscience program today. So we'll start with Dan Feldman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Feldman. I'm a faculty member in the neuroscience program. I have many roles on campus, but I'm very involved in both helping to advertise and fill in information about the program for people considering applying, training people when they get here, and helping students out in many, many ways.
Thank you, Dan. And our moderator for today's session is Leleña Avila. Leleña, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Leleña Avila. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the graduate program manager for our neuroscience PhD program. And I'm going to be kind of behind the scenes, taking care of the technical aspects today and kind of monitoring the chat and that kind of thing for you. But I'm really excited to see so many people at our event today.
Thank you, Leleña. We also have three graduate students who are currently enrolled in the Berkeley Neuroscience program: Christiane, Corrina, and Dosia. The three students, would you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Christiane. I am a sixth-year graduate student here at UC Berkeley, and I'm in Marla Feller's lab, and we can say like a developmental and circuit neuroscience lab. And what I've been focusing on with my research is looking at a phenomenon in the developing nervous system, or just the developing retina, called retinal waves, and looking at these waves in embryonic retinas. So you can kind of think of retinal waves as spontaneous activity that happens in the developing retina. And what I've been trying to understand is how they're generated and potentially why they're generated in the embryonic retina. And so my thesis, that is the main topic or the main focus of my thesis project. And the title is changing, but a couple months ago, it was the cellular mechanisms that underlie embryonic retinal waves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corrina. I'm a second year in the program. Christiane, did you freeze or something?
Did I?
Oh, no. Okay. Sorry. I thought you were still talking. Hi, everyone. I'm Corrina. I'm a second year in the program. I am in Bill Jagus' lab, and in the lab we use PET imaging to study the deposition and accumulation of pathological proteins in aging and in Alzheimer's disease. So as a second year, I'm still developing my thesis, but right now the title is Network Drivers of regional vulnerability to pathological proteins in preclinical AD. That's basically just looking at the relationships between functional connectivity that harbor both amyloid and tau, which are the two pathological proteins that are involved in Alzheimer's disease, and how connectivity promotes the spread of those pathological proteins in preclinical Alzheimer's disease. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Dosia. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a first year in the program. I am currently rotating in Andrea Gomez's lab, and I'm investigating the cellular and molecular changes underlying cognitive flexibility associated with a single high dose of psychedelics. So I'm looking at DOI and psilocybin, and I am using electrophysiology and whole cell patch clamping neurons in the prefrontal cortex.
Wonderful, thank you. So our plan for today is that faculty member Dan Feldman will give you all a brief overview of our program and the application process. We'll have our current graduate students talk about their experiences as students in the program. And then we want to make sure to save time to field questions from all of you about the program. So if you have questions, you can use the raise hand button in Zoom, and we will call on you, or you can write your questions in the chat, whichever you prefer. And before we get going, I just want to make an announcement that we have an event coming up on November 4th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It is an Ask Me Anything event that our graduate students are hosting. And so this is any questions that you have that you would like to ask directly of the students in the program. It's for prospective applicants to our program. It'll be held on Zoom. And so I encourage all of you to attend that session. And Leleña will post a link to the Zoom information for that event, and it's also available on our website. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan Feldman.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to share a few slides here. Okay, so my role is to give some introduction to what our program is. We're a neuroscience PhD training program here at Berkeley, and we have a really exciting program for training students in many different areas of neuroscience. Actually, I should probably start out by congratulating all of you for developing an interest in this incredibly important field. Neuroscience is not only, one of the most interesting sort of unsolved aspects of biology and behavior and computation, but it's one that joins areas of study on basic biology, on computation, on behavior, on cognition, many different aspects. So it's very highly interdisciplinary and lots of great questions. Here at Berkeley, we cover neuroscience in really all of its range, from cellular and molecular neuroscience on up through how neural circuits and systems work. Lots of emphasis on various diseases, what goes wrong in disease, understanding disease, developing new treatments for disease. We also have strong emphasis in cognitive neuroscience, including human cognitive neuroscience, and in computational neuroscience as well. So lots of exciting questions. And one of the really fun things I think about graduate school and graduate training is that you get to learn really incredible emerging methods in studying these different aspects of brain function. I'm highlighting some of these on the bottom of the slide, but across campus have really a tremendous range of different cool techniques that students like you would learn how to apply to make discoveries in how the brain works and what goes wrong in disease. So how do we do this on campus? Well, we have 72 neuroscience faculty who are spread out among many different departments, some of which are listed here on the right. But what brings us together is this common neuroscience PhD program, which is the program that I think many of you are considering applying to. In these 72 labs, each lab has some number of PhD students and postdoctoral researchers. And when you add them up together, we have hundreds of trainees and something like 500 total people on campus doing neuroscience. So this is really a major effort at Berkeley, covering all of these different realms of neuroscience, as I mentioned. So one important aspect of thinking about applying to Berkeley to study neuroscience is asking yourself what PhD program at Berkeley is most suited to what you want to learn. we have multiple different PhD programs at Berkeley in which students can study neuroscience. So probably the main program is the Helen Wills Neuroscience Institute, HW&I program, which we call the Neuroscience PhD program. And this is a program that spans all areas of neuroscience and accepts somewhere around 12 or a little bit more students per year spread across these areas. We also have a big PhD program in molecular and cell biology, that's MCB, which really spans a broad swath of biology, but includes neuroscience. And there's about almost 40 students per year in that program, but about 4 to 5 of them are specifically interested in studying neuroscience when they arrive. There's a really terrific biophysics program that again has multiple foci, but within that, there's a few students per year that join neuroscience labs and study different aspects of neuroscience, including mostly systems neuroscience and imaging approaches. There's a very strong psychology PhD program, again, very broad, but a big chunk of that is human cognitive neuroscience and systems and behavioral neuroscience. And there's probably 5 students per year who come in through that program to study neuro. And then finally, there's a very strong vision science program that covers lots of aspects about the visual system in health and disease. And this admits about 8 to 10 students per year studying all aspects of vision. So Berkeley only allows each applicant to apply to 1 PhD program on a given cycle. So you need to decide which one is best for you. And actually, I'm giving a link to a website there, on the bottom, which will have links in it that can help you understand the different programs and decide which one is right for you. Okay, so let me talk about the neuroscience PhD program in particular, because that's kind of our most dedicated neuroscience program. And I'll tell you what life is like for a graduate student as you progress through the program. So how's the program structured? So we start off just before the fall semester starts of the first year, offering some boot camps that are 10-day long experiences in learning basic principles of neuroscience, trying out some experimental methods that you may not have tried before, and learning some quantitative methods and approaches for analyzing neural data. And so this is a way of bonding with your first year class, doing a lot of things together, learning a lot of cool new stuff together before you actually start on formal classes. So those are the boot camps. And then over the course of the first year, each of these yellow dots is a year here, students complete 3 research rotations in different laboratories. And the goal is to figure out what kind of science you like doing, what kind of lab environment, what kind of PI you really like to have, and you choose where you want to join your thesis lab. You join that lab at the end of the first year. In the first 2 years, you're actually taking a set of required classes. Most students take 2 classes in the first year and 1 class in the third year. And so by the time you're at the end of your second year, you're in a thesis lab, you've taken all your classes, you've really worked out what your research goals are going to be for your thesis. And then you take your qualifying exam where you propose those goals and you get feedback from faculty who will help determine, what directions that you propose are really, the best ones, and whether you're really prepared to take, that independent research work going forward. So that qualifying exam happens at the end of the second year. You guys probably know that pretty much all graduate programs have this sort of early classes period followed by a qualifying exam before you do your thesis research. So the same is true at Berkeley. The next 3+ years are involved in your thesis research, during which you take another advanced seminar class, you're publishing papers, you're completing your studies. And at the end, when you have enough published work together or ready to be published work together, then you submit your thesis. And the average time to completion at Berkeley is 5.5 years. Actually, these days with the pandemic, I think we're at 5.7 years right now, but our goal is 5.5 years. So during this time, this is what you're doing. We have a lot more fun stuff that we add in for students during this time. There are annual retreats, there's seminar series, there's journal clubs, there's lab meetings and multi-group lab meetings, there's professional training, so lots of other things that are happening, but this is the main backbone. Now, for many students, we feel like it's really essential to be able to learn how to communicate science very well during your time in grad school as well. And so in addition, we have the requirement that students learn how to teach by becoming a teaching assistant, a TA, which here at Berkeley we call graduate student instructor or GSI, in 2 classes, which are going to be scattered in years 2 and year 3. But aside from that, there's no additional teaching. So you really can focus almost all of your time on your education and your research. Okay, now during this whole time, I just want to mention that students receive full paid tuition and stipend and health insurance for their entire time in graduate school. And this is going to be true, I think, pretty much at all programs you'll be applying to. So that's, I think, an important thing to know. Okay, where are our students coming from? Our students come from all over geographically. They come from many, many different backgrounds, many different communities, many different scientific interests. And we're really committed here at Berkeley to provide a diverse and inclusive training environment and to really support the students that come here. And we want to train and we want them all to do well. And we really believe that diversity makes better science in many, many ways, and that all students who come into our program can make important contributions to really advancing discovery. And that's the goal during the PhD. So I'm giving you a little map here for where many of our students come from, but I also want to point out that we have many programs on campus that are related to equity and DEI in order to support students and make sure that we're doing the very best job that we can in educating a broad swath of students. And I'm happy to answer any questions about these if you guys have questions. On the bottom, I'm just giving you a little bit of demographic information from the past 5 or 6 years. Currently, 34% of our students self-report that they're from underrepresented backgrounds. 15% of our students currently are international students from these very wide range of places. Okay, so we really want to develop a strong community here, and I think we do a pretty good job for our students. We have programs that encourage students to get to know each other. We have something called NeuroFriends, where students are basically paid to go out to lunch and get to know each other. We have social hours. Each incoming student gets mentoring from more senior students. And we have an advising system that really provides advising from a different series of faculty completely throughout the student's time in graduate school. And our students do really, really well. We have over 90% PhD completion rate. We have lots of happy students. Graduate school is hard, I think you probably all know, and so there's always challenges, but we really work to support our students and to help them support each other. This just gives you a little bit of a flavor for how successful our students are. We have many, many student-authored papers that are coming out each year in great journals. Our students are encouraged to apply for outside fellowships. It's not a requirement, but we encourage students to do it. And many of our students are successful, so that by the time they graduate, about 40% of our students have won some kind of competitive outside fellowship. And our students go on to great careers in a really broad range of career paths. And I do want to emphasize that even though academic research is a major goal for many people who come to graduate school, there's really quite a diversity. Many people want to go to industry. Many people are interested in science-related careers, in building startup companies, in doing all sorts of different things. And I think at Berkeley, we do a very good job of encouraging people to follow their highest goals and meet whatever career they want to meet. So our students go on into many different interesting careers. So I want to close by just offering a little bit of advice, because we are in application season and some of you might be thinking about how to actually do your application for graduate school. So you know that at Berkeley, we require 2 different essays that students write to present themselves to us as you apply. There's a statement of purpose and there's a personal statement. And I just want to mention what the different role of those 2 essays is. The statement of purpose is really there for you to describe to us your motivation for doing neuroscience, your research experience that you've had, and your intellectual goals for grad school. And the main thing that people usually put in this essay is to tell us about past research projects, not just what methods you know how to do, but how you like to think about science, what questions intrigue you. Give us an example of some research that you did. What was the question? What was the method you used? What did you find? How did you interpret that? Give us a little feel for how you think about science. So that's the goal of the statement of purpose. The goal of the personal statement is broader, right? It's not just about the science that you've done. It's about who you are and where you're coming from and maybe what your broader goals are. And this is your opportunity to tell us about your background, the challenges you've had, and the broader context of why you're choosing to go to graduate school and what you had to do to get here. In addition, on the application, there's room for you to indicate some faculty that you are particularly interested in. And this is actually quite important. We really want people to look through that faculty list and try to identify faculty, and what I really mean is research areas that seem to interest you. And when you list those, that gives us a little bit of flavor of what direction you think you might want to go in graduate school. Of course, you can change your mind, but this helps us kind of understand what your goals are. So we're not looking for any one type of person. We're looking for a very broad set of talents and backgrounds. And we typically get a great set of students applying each year, and I encourage you to apply. I believe I have the application deadline correct this year. I think it's November 30th. So that's when it happens. We have lots of fee waivers, by the way, if you're coming from various programs. I'm listing some of them here. You can find more of them on the General Neuroscience Program website. So there we go. This is a view from campus at Berkeley looking across the bay. And we're happy to take questions, and I encourage you guys to apply. And I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So now we'll hear from our awesome current students. We've asked each of the three students to say something about how they originally decided to apply to Berkeley Neuroscience, how they chose to come to the program, and then maybe something that they would tell their former selves, what they wish they had known then, what they know now about the application process or anything about graduate school. So we'll start with Christiane, and then Corrina, and then Dosia.
Before I answer the question, I think I want to give a bit of background of where I come from and the kind of work that I did in undergrad. So I did my undergrad at Syracuse University, which is in upstate New York. And my undergraduate project was on transcription factors that would potentially be important for the development of excitatory interneurons in the spinal cord. And that was exciting because a lot of interneurons in the central nervous system or in the nervous system in general are not excitatory. A lot of them are inhibitory. So it was really cool to kind of try and get a sense of how the few excitatory interneurons in a central nervous system developed. And so I focused on three different types of transcription factors that were all related to each other. So they were essentially just splice forms of one another. It was a score 1A, B, and score 2. And so that was my background. And so in applying to graduate school, I tried to not limit myself to what I knew. I tried to make sure that I kept my horizon or my options open, because I knew that what I had known, I felt comfortable with, but nobody grows when they're comfortable, right? Like, it's always better to try and keep my options open and try to really push myself to learn something new and something different. And so in trying to apply to graduate school, I spoke to people in my lab. I spoke to postdocs, I spoke to graduate students, and the name UC Berkeley came up. And that was a recommendation from the postdoc that I was actually working with on my undergraduate thesis project. And he had nothing but great things to say about a neuroscience program. And so it really put UC Berkeley on my radar. And of course, I went online and I Googled a bunch, and I saw that UC Berkeley had like a great neuroscience program, one of the top in the country. And so I was curious. And so I decided to not just stop there, but to do what Dan suggested, which is actually look at the list of faculty on the website and see the kind of research that's being done on campus currently. And in doing that, I came up with a list of 3 faculty that I knew I would be interested in talking to if I was to move forward into the interview process. And so Marla was actually one of the faculty on my list. And so I wrote her name down because I knew that I was interested in development, and she did, and her research and the research that we do in lab has a really big developmental aspect to it. And so when I wrote down my application, I was sure to write down the things about her research that I found the most interesting. I had no idea what retinal waves were until I actually got on campus and I interviewed with Marla, and I saw a movie of retinal waves, and I got to see what experiments would be like in the lab. I just got lucky that on the day of my interview, there was actually an experiment that a previous graduate student was doing, and he was sharp filling these cells. So sharp fill is just you're using a very small pipette and you're essentially injecting a fluorescent dye in there, so you can map out the morphology of a cell. And so this graduate student was injecting this fluorescent dye into the cell to look at its morphology for a project that he was doing. And I thought that was the coolest thing, because just to even make that pipette it's a whole process. You have to use a microforge. What is that? So it was very interesting. And so when I got to Berkeley and I got to actually interact with the people here and I got to see how research was being done, I felt like this was a place where I could not just grow and be challenged, but a place where I could actually get to grow culturally, right? Because it wasn't similar to the background that I grew up with, and especially in terms of how people in Berkeley, the city and the town, go about their lives. And so I think not just my intellectual curiosity got me to Berkeley, but also wanting to be in an environment where I had to be completely out of my comfort zone, both intellectually and also culturally. And I think being that I spent most of my 20s in graduate school, I really got to develop as an adult and grow into myself as an adult, and being here at Berkeley really had a huge role to play in that. And that's not to say that things were easy. They were not easy, and they have not been easy, and they will not continue to be easy. But it's all worth it. All the work, all the heartache, all the stress is worth it. So yeah, that's a little bit of my reason for applying to graduate school. And if I could go back and tell myself something, I would say that get ready to work hard, get ready to be stressed out, to be a little in the funk sometimes, but to always remember that you are capable of doing more than you think you can, and never give up. Just get up every just keep getting up, never stay down. So that's what I would warn myself. I would definitely warn myself of that.
Thank you. That was very inspiring, Christiane. Appreciate it. Corrina?
Yeah. So I guess my background is actually totally different from Christiane's background. In undergrad, I studied psychology and cognitive science. And so when I was applying to graduate school directly from undergrad, I applied to a lot of psychology programs. And obviously I didn't get in because I'm not in one of those programs. And so, I worked in neuroimaging for quite a while, and then I reapplied, and I didn't even realize that I could apply to neuroscience programs because I thought neuroscience programs were exclusively focused on cellular and systems mechanisms of neuroscience. So that's kind of one thing that drew me to Berkeley was there's a huge diversity in the types of projects and research areas that people study. And I interviewed at several different schools, and I think Berkeley does the best job at integrating kind of the cognitive, the systems, and the cellular aspects of neuroscience. So yeah, I think this program does a good job at that. And I think another reason that I chose to apply to Berkeley was probably logistical, because I am from the Bay Area. I grew up here, my family's here, so I wanted to stay in the Bay Area. But there's also just a huge neuroscience community within the Bay Area outside of Berkeley. There's Stanford pretty close by, there's UCSF, and there's a lot of collaborations that can be, very easily facilitated working at UC Berkeley. Those are kind of my reasons. Another reason, when I was interviewing at other schools in the neuroscience programs, I think the students seemed the happiest when I interviewed at Berkeley. So that was another really encouraging thing about UC Berkeley, is all the students seem to be happy with their lives. I mean, graduate school is very, tough. It takes a lot of your time. It can be stressful at times. And it seemed like there was a really good community that kept everyone in good spirits. So that was another driving factor for ultimately choosing Berkeley, because I think everyone seemed to be very happy here, and having being in the program now, it's true. People are very happy here and very chill and kind of go with the flow. And then one thing I wish I knew about the program before, I didn't even know this, and I found out pretty quickly after I chose Berkeley that Berkeley doesn't have a formal defense of your thesis. So you can, other graduate schools, you have to formally defend your thesis. I've seen people defend their thesis. It seems very stressful. So I think that's definitely a plus for this graduate program, that you don't have to stand up and, give a formal defense. So I encourage everyone who's interested in any type of neuroscience. And if you have a background in cognitive psychology, cognitive science, whatever, and you're interested in more broad neuroscience, I think this is a great program for that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Corrina. I'll just say a little more about your last point. So Corrina's correct. Of course, we don't have a formal, stressful exit seminar, or the possibility that after all the years of graduate school, the program tells you actually can't graduate. We leave that to the thesis committee members to decide. But we do have a dissertation symposium that's more of a celebration and a chance for all of our graduating students to share their work with the neuroscience community, but also with their friends and family. And so that happens every semester for the students that are graduating that semester. Okay, next we will hear from Dosia, who is a first-year student in our program.
Hi, everyone. I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to University of Chicago, so I kind of lived in cold weather my whole life. So I only applied to graduate schools that were somewhere warm, and I was like, I'm done with this winter stuff. I'm going somewhere warm. So I was kind of talking to my undergraduate advisor, and she was suggesting schools for me and suggested that I looked into Berkeley. And I wasn't super sure what I wanted to study in graduate school and what I wanted to do career-wise. But as people have said, and as I found out looking through the program website, that there's just such a wide range of projects and labs to be involved with here. And I felt genuinely excited about so many of them while looking through the program website. So I decided to apply for that reason. And then as I started talking to more graduate students here and postdocs, all the students seemed genuinely happy, and they seemed like they had really healthy work-life balance. One of the questions that I tried to ask to everyone that I talked to, regardless of what school I was looking at, was what are your hobbies? To see if they were I just kind of go home and watch TV and sleep, or if they were oh, I like to go hiking, which is super common in the Bay. Did they play sports? Were they involved in the neuro band here? That's another thing that people do. And I feel like a lot of the students here just had really different hobbies that they were very involved in, and they seemed like they were able to have really fulfilling lives outside of just being in lab every day. And that was something that was important to me to have as I entered graduate school. One of the things that I wish I knew about the program when I was applying, I guess was how important programs like NeuroFriends and the mentorship would be to my experience here. So as Michael mentioned, we're given money each week to kind of go out to lunch or go out to dinner with my cohort. And I feel like that's been a really great bonding experience for us all. And I feel really close and bonded to my cohort. And then we also have a mentorship program. So I'm paired with a fourth-year mentor. I feel like she's been a really amazing go-to person for me to just ask really any kind of question that I have. And then another program that I've really enjoyed is our program conference / retreat. So we just had that this past weekend. We all went down to Monterey and did a lot of science work, heard from some keynote speakers, a lot of people that are in the program, but then we also had a lot of time to socialize and kind of go down to the beach, and that was really enjoyable. Another thing that I wish I knew about the program was what boot camp was really like. I was kind of nervous going into it. We have this 10-day long boot camp before the program starts. And I was oh my God, they're going to make us do such hard work. I'm really intimidated by this whole thing. But it really ended up being a lot of learning for the sake of learning and kind of getting us all up to speed on cellular neuroscience, systems, cognitive, computational. I didn't have a strong computational background coming in, so I was especially nervous for those days. But I feel like the professors made coding really accessible to everyone, no matter what level you were at. So that was really something that I didn't need to be nervous about. And I feel like it set the tone for my first semester in the program to be very much learning for the sake of learning. And I feel like that's extended into my classes and into my labs. And I feel very comfortable asking really any kind of question that I have to faculty and other students.
Super, thank you. I'm glad to hear you say that about the boot camp. There's definitely been some people that suggested we use a less militaristic name to more accurately reflect how gentle and welcoming the program is. And I'm glad to hear that seems like that was your experience. All right, so now we would love to hear from you, the prospective applicants, about any questions you have about the application process or life in Berkeley or what it's like to be a graduate student here. If you're comfortable asking the question directly, just go ahead and raise your hand and we can call on you. If you'd rather type your question into the chat, that's fine too. Yes, Akita.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good, great. Hi, hello. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. And I have one question. So is it necessary for the prospective applicant to contact with the professors that they're interested in the application process, like by email, or is that necessary or suggested?
It's certainly not necessary. If you have a faculty member you're interested in, there's really no reason for you not to reach out. Some of the faculty members get many requests like that. And so they may say, you know, we can talk if you are invited for an interview, but they may be able to share more about the research projects in their lab and what their plans are for students in the future. So I think it's, you know, can only help. And but it's not something, so to the extent that you've communicated with a faculty member, you can put that in your application essay. That's probably a positive, but it's certainly not a requirement that you've had direct connections with any of the faculty members to be competitive in the application process.
Yes, thank you so much. I understand it. Thank you.
And of course, for Leleña, Dan, and our students, please feel free to chime in for any of these questions that come up. Okay, Christian. Go ahead.
Hello all. Thanks for this seminar. I just had 2 quick questions. So in my case, I have a background in cellular and molecular neuroscience, but for graduate school, I would like to transition or at least try for my rotations more systems neuroscience, although I don't have that much background in that area. Is that a pretty common phenomena for graduate students that they transition into a different realm of neuroscience once they get to graduate school?
Yeah, I can speak on this a little bit because I came in with a kind of, I guess, similar situation where my background was mostly like institutes, PCRs, and doing a lot of like genotyping and animal colony stuff. But so I didn't do a lot of circuit stuff at all. I never patched a cell, and my rotation was my second rotation, which was in this lab where my thesis lab was all electrophysiology. And we have 10 weeks for a rotation, and I learned how to patch cells within those 10 weeks. And I was able to get data, analyze data, present the data. And so I think that, you know, one of the great things about the program is that you can definitely get people to instruct you in the things that you need to be instructed in. So if you have a limited knowledge, as long as you are willing to learn, then the people who are here to teach you how to do things are available, and you will learn just fine.
And let me add to that and say it's very, very common for people to move from one area that they had their undergraduate experience in into another area. I mean, we all know that for most students, the undergraduate research experience that you've had is often kind of like happenstance, like there happened to be an opening in a lab or you happen to take a class and so you did that, but that's not your long-term goal. And the first year in graduate school is the perfect year to explore other things you're interested in.
Yeah, I'll also just emphasize that how common that is, and that it's generally important for you to have some kind of meaningful research experience to, you know, first of all, so that you know what you're getting into in graduate school, you know what research is really like, that's beyond your classroom education. But the graduate school is an educational and training experience, and so you're going to learn a tremendous amount as a student. We're not looking for students to arrive already fully formed that way, and so as long as you've shown some interest and aptitude in doing research, then the particular of the research, you know, you need some kind of basic familiarity with neuroscience and some basic kind of quantitative analytical abilities. But there's no expectation that you need to follow what you're doing in your undergraduate research directly for your dissertation research.
Yeah. Hey, maybe I can deal with a couple of questions in the chat and then we can go to the next hand raised. But so Aj asks, is it possible to be awarded a master's after the qualifying exam? We really don't want to accept students who are coming here with an intention of getting a master's. This is not a master's program. This is a PhD program. We do have a route that if someone comes in wanting to do a PhD, but then they discover after a few years that this is really not for them and they want a different type of career path, then if you've passed the qualifying exam, you can exit with a master's. So that does exist. But we are really not set up for students who have that as their goal coming in. Jojo asked, where in the application is it the right place to express your excitement in Berkeley as an area or city or cultural change? I think that's probably the right thing to do in the personal statement, and that the statement of purpose would be more about your sort of scientific inspiration and what you want to do scientifically. Let's do one more here. Malia asks, how does the neuroscience program outreach to the community? Or are there other opportunities to outreach to the surrounding community with your research? Actually, this might be a good one for the students, but I'll just say that many of our students do different types of outreach to the community. In many cases, it's to schools nearby. There's a really interesting prison project at San Quentin Prison that a lot of students have been involved with. And there's also outreach in the sense of students who are interested in exploring paths to research or paths to graduate school will often come to Berkeley for summer research or to get research experience. And in many cases, our graduate students are their mentors as they do that. But maybe some of the students could talk about this outreach aspect as well.
Yeah, I can talk about my experience with this. Last year, I participated in this program called BASIS. It's not actually a UC Berkeley program, it's through the community in Berkeley. But basically what we do is we get in groups of 2 or 3 people, students in the program, and we can go into a 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade class, I believe was the age range, in a local elementary school in Berkeley, and teach about the brain. And last year it was on Zoom. I think this year they've transitioned back into doing in-person stuff, so I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I'm looking forward to it maybe next semester. But it's really fun to go in and, introduce yourself like, hi, I'm a scientist, I study the brain. The kids get super excited about it. And it's a great way to kind of show, younger generations of, it's not just science isn't this, kind of far out thing and it's so hard and difficult. It can be actually really fun. And, we show them pictures of different types of animal brains and they get really excited about that. So that's one program that I've participated in. And we have, it's always an ongoing thing. It's very flexible. If you don't have a ton of time on one day, there's always sessions you can get together, and we have slides already made. So you kind of just have to go through that kind of general overview of the brain. But it's really fun. And I think that the kids really enjoyed it too. So yeah.
Just to add to that, there's another program for actually being a research mentor for community college students who are trying to transfer to a four-year institution. Some of them transfer to UC Berkeley. So it's called the Bridges to Baccalaureate program. It's funded by the NIH. And it's a really great program where you have the opportunity to mentor students who haven't had the opportunity to do research in lab for 10 weeks.
Could you say the name of that program again?
Yeah, Bridges to Baccalaureate program by the NIH. There's also the MGen program that runs through campus as well. There are a bunch of programs.
Now, there's another program our students participate in is called Expanding Your Horizons, and that actually brings young girls to our campus to interact with research scientists and see research labs and learn about life as a scientist.
In addition to BASIS, kind of similar, I think it might also be through there, but instead of going into schools and actually teaching, you can kind of collaborate with teachers that are in the classrooms and help them write science curriculum for their students.
Okay, the questions are coming in like wildfire to the chat, but William, I think, has had his hand up for a while. Maybe William, want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about kind of interdisciplinary collaborations. So we all know that neuroscience is very interdisciplinary. So I was curious, what's the possibility of joining a lab group outside of the specified program and maybe doing an interdisciplinary collaboration and setting up co-advising?
So I'd say around 10 or 20% of our students have dual advisors because they've set up a particular interdisciplinary project between two labs, and that's the goal for their whole thesis. Even more common than that is for people to join individual labs, but then in the course of doing their research, there's some aspect of what they do, which is a collaboration with other labs, and they work with teams of people. I would encourage you, though, that if you have like specific faculty members that are not in the neuroscience program that you think would be your main interest for PhD study, you should apply to a graduate program where they are the member. Like, that's the most straightforward way to do it. So I would at least make sure that you have, people in the faculty in the neuroscience program that you would be interested in at least doing part of your work with. Then that would be the right sort of, motivation for applying to the Helen Willis program. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
One distinctive aspect about our graduate program is it's interdepartmental. And so more than a dozen departments are represented in our faculty. So basically anyone in our campus who's faculty member doing neuroscience research who wants to work with graduate students is eligible to join the neuroscience program. So it encompasses a huge range of different faculty members. We actually have more faculty members in our program than graduate students. So
okay,
there's many possibilities to find co-mentors that are both within our program.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of background too for me, just kind of my motivation for asking the question is because I come from a mainly chemistry/biochemistry background. So I'm very much interested in like collaborations in terms of neurobiochemistry and protein study and things like that. So yeah, a little background there.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, let's go through a little bit on the chat questions again. I think that, by the way, Leleña is answering some of these in the chat. So if your question's been there, it's possible it's answered down below. So I'm just going to pick some here. How long does it usually take to graduate? As I mentioned, our goal is 5.5 years. These days, it's more like 5.7. I think this is very, very common across neuroscience programs, that length. Someone is interested in the vision science program. Maybe we can put in a contact person for vision science in the chat. What are the funding options and opportunities to attend conferences? That's a good question. There is some money that each student gets in their first 2 years in order to help defray the cost to send them to a conference in their first 2 years. After the first 2 years, it's really up to the individual labs when you join a lab to send the students in that lab to conferences. We encourage all of our faculty to be sending students regularly to conferences. And I think, one of the important questions to ask maybe when you apply and are accepted and you come to campus on our recruitment visit to see what it's like here, is to ask the students in the labs you're interested in, like, what it's like in those particular labs. But I think in most labs, students go to a conference probably every year or every other year. I think that's the most common, but it's going to vary from lab to lab. Should we go to a question from Ruchi? Ruchi, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the detailed overview. It has cleared many doubts. I had a question about the interviews. So how are these interviews basically conducted? Are they in person and with an aspect or a perspective for an international student, since I'm not in the States?
Michael, you want to take that?
Sure. So our interviews will be virtual. And then following the interview process, we will extend invitations for admission to students. And then at that point, they'll have the opportunity to come to the campus to meet everyone in person as they're making their decision about which graduate school to attend.
Okay, so the interview.
We pay for that on-campus visit, regardless of where students are coming from.
Okay, so the interviews would be prior to getting an admit into the program, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, should we take Emma's question?
Sure.
Hello. Thank you all. Can you hear me? Also, I got new AirPods and okay, cool. Thank you so much for all of this very insightful information. I too have a undergraduate background not directly related to neuroscience. However, I'm extremely interested in neuroscience, and I'm wondering the benefit of a post-bac program to kind of like get me up to speed on like the biology, chemistry, like OChem, that aspect, if you think that that would be like a logical next step. My undergrad is in cognitive science, but I feel like it would be applicable to like even psychology. They don't really have like the that level of classes for that would be applicable. So just wondering if you think that that's like beneficial or if that maybe would be not worth the money, things like that.
I would say from an application point of view, it doesn't really matter what field you're coming from, as long as you have some serious research experience in that field. And then you can explain in your application why you want to, study neuroscience as opposed to cognitive science or something else for your PhD. So there's no real requirement that you have to have post-bac classes in, biology or chemistry. Whether that's worthwhile to you, I think, depends on what you're going to do when you come to graduate school. If you know for sure that you want to make the transition to studying, I don't know, cellular development of neuron types, then it might be helpful to get some background before you come here, but you don't need it for the application. And we recognize, like most neuroscience programs, that students really come from a whole bunch of different backgrounds. And our goal is to, give people the introduction to neuro that they need at multiple levels and help them get started at those levels in graduate school.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, I feel like we should go back to the chat because that is building up again. Career paths. Salma asked, what career paths do our students take after graduation? And do we have a career center? So I think I mentioned a little bit in my remarks that our students really do take multiple career paths. I think the number for like we keep track of where students go, and I think something like 70 or 75% of students, when they graduate from our program, take a postdoctoral research position because their aim is to go into some type of academic research. 30% of students right away as they graduate go on to a different path, and that ranges from biotech and industry science positions, sort of science adjacent positions related to science policy or science law or communication of science. Some people decide that they want to go on an education path, and maybe they want to become like a teaching professor at a university, or even in some cases secondary school teachers. We have people who abandon science completely because they want to, go to work for McKinsey and make $1 million helping companies, sell products better or whatever. So people go in many different directions, but I will say that nobody leaves graduate school with a bad job. These are great careers and they're really interesting and people do great things. A lot of people here are somewhat entrepreneurial, and so they might be the CEO or the chief scientific officer of some startup company based on some cool ideas that they and their friends had right in graduate school. So people do lots of different things, and I think we want to promote that. We work to promote that. Do we have a career center? Campus has a lot of career advising. In the biosciences, we do collectively in the biosciences, not just neuroscience, we do provide a bunch of ways that students can get career information. We probably should do more of this, honestly, but we have, I think, a reasonable amount that we can offer now.
I can take that question about the tuition in healthcare. So in our program, if students are making progress towards their degree, then their tuition is guaranteed. After the second year in the program, that's usually paid for by research grants from their PI, their faculty mentor. Even if the faculty mentor is having trouble, though, and there's a rough spot between grants, the program has resources to step in so that the students never have to worry about whether their tuition is going to be covered in any given semester. And then the comprehensive healthcare for a student enrolled in the program, there's just student healthcare for the duration of your time in the program.
Yeah. And then there's a question about fee waivers. Is there an application fee waiver for international students? Actually, Leleña, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the graduate division does not offer fee waivers for international students.
All right, Anthony has had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, I just can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the kind of the resolution of the personal, or sorry, the statement of purpose. If we have an idea for research with the faculty members that we've been working with before applying, is that something that we should talk about in great detail at the detriment of maybe like talking about other faculty member that we might want to work with? If the statement's a little bit lopsided, is that okay? Or
well, you know, the thing that when the admissions committee reads those personal statements, what we're trying to do is get an idea of how you think about science and what inspires you about science. And so if you can express that best by talking about some project that you're really excited about with a faculty member that you might do for graduate school, that's great. Most people don't do that. Most people will express that by describing past research work that they've done and then the direction that they want to go. So I think you have a lot of latitude to, you know, organize that essay the way you want.
thank you.
Yeah, I will say we generally discourage students to do something in graduate school that's very much the same as what they've done beforehand in the same lab, using the same methods and the same kinds of questions. Graduate school should be about expanding your horizons and moving in a new direction and gaining new skills and techniques and conceptual knowledge and so forth. So I would recommend that you identify a direction that you could go in at UC Berkeley that would be something that would really, you know, help to develop you as a scientist beyond the work that you're currently doing.
Okay, going back to the chat, does the department go to neurospecific conferences together or is it lab dependent? It's really mostly lab dependent, although it's always true for any major conference that there are a bunch of people from Berkeley going. And so students, you know who's going. And I think they often will hang out together and sometimes even get a place to stay together, but it's not official on the part of the program. Let's see, does the program have many sources for internal funding? You know, we try to organize this so that students don't have to worry about their funding for graduate school. If you come here and are accepted, you come to Berkeley, you don't have to worry that you have to scrounge and raise the funds, you know, from year to year for your program. That will be taken care of by some combination of your thesis advisor and the program, and you shouldn't have to worry about that. We don't really have internal competitions for funding for students. I know that some programs have that. We're not set up that way right now. And we do encourage students to apply to outside fellowships. And in fact, we offer some training on how to write good fellowship applications for that, but it's not a requirement for being in the program.
All right, we are unfortunately out of time. I think we've managed to address almost all of the questions today, but of course there'll be other questions that will come up as you develop your applications and so forth. So you should always feel free to contact Leleña, our graduate program manager. She just put her email in the chat. Of course, you can find her email also through our website. Just want to remind everyone that we've got the application Ask Me Anything panel that is hosted by our current graduate students. They're also a rich source of information about the application process and really help provide the students' perspective on it. So that will be November 4th on Zoom. And also information about that is Leleña is putting into the chat. And just a reminder, our application deadline is November 30th. You are welcome to apply before then, but that's the deadline after which the application window will close and we'll start reviewing the applications. So thank you so much for participating today, for all your excellent questions. Thanks to Leleña, Dan, and all of our graduate students and currently in the program for helping to put on today's session. And it was wonderful to see you all. Take care.